we have this common thread amongst us. So that also means that we have common issues that are of interest to us. They affect us in our daily lives, and this is what we are going to discuss today with our speaker and among other things. So just let me give you a quick background of what exactly we are concerned here with. As we all know, as non-native English speakers, sometimes we face a lot of discrimination in our work or professional lives. As compared to the natives, we are always considered as lesser, or the natives are considered the rightful speakers of English. As a result, face a lot of condescension, we face discrimination in employment, a lot of disrespect in our professional lives at times. I have faced a lot of situations like this. This is what we call, the racism in TEFL, or hearing with one's eyes. Yani, instead of seeing, you are hearing, yani, on the basis on the basis of the person's accent or pronunciation, you are discriminating them. So on the basis of the skin color or ethnicity or their background, you discriminate people. And so
excuse me, around the accent or imagined accent.
Imagined accent. That's why we call it hearing with one's eyes, So yani, you are hearing, but you're also looking at the skin color or the ethnicity or other things which are more important to you. And instead of looking at their credentials or teaching credentials, we look at their background, their ethnicity, and their pronunciation, or their accent actually, rather, not pronunciation. Pronunciation has to be good or correct. And it's an unfair practice, because if you look at the native speakers, they do have so many accents, don't they? So how can we discriminate people on the basis of accents? And as a result of that, non-native speakers like us, we are sometimes forced to accept jobs which are inferior to according to our calibers, and we have to prove ourselves as if we are we have to prove ourselves as more effective as the native speakers, which is always unfair. Research shows that today, if we look at the numbers, non-native English speaking teachers or speakers are more in number as compared to the native speakers of English. So how do you compare that? And in inner circle countries, in which my home country, which is India, also comes, we have Singapore, we have Hong Kong. These countries, they use English as the first language. I was taught in English as a first language right from kindergarten. So how do I treat myself? Should I call myself native or a non-native? So this kind of discrimination is very unfair. And if we look at our common attributes, we are good in something and natives are good in something. If we are good in syntax and syntactical structures, or maybe in language, they are good in skills, language skills, any kind of skills. So it's like a balance. In some things we are better, in some things they are better. So, and most importantly, what we need to remember is that all it accounts to at the end of the day is intelligibility. How I understand you, how I communicate with you. Can I understand what you're saying, or do you understand what I am saying? So this is what matters, not the accent. So how can we improve?
Miss Rana, I'm so sorry to break in. Can I do my part, because I'll have a taxi waiting to whisk me off to the airport and then to Kuwait.
Okay, no problem, Alison. Go ahead.
I have a few slides. Maybe you could return to yours.
Yes.
Just a minute. To go forward a few slides, if that's possible.
Yeah, why is this thing not moving? Just a minute.
Stop sharing this.
Oh, this is not, the slides are not moving.
You have to stop sharing the screen, I believe.
No, I don't know. Anyhow, I'll try to move it with my cursor. That's all right. Alison, slides, here they are. This is where it starts, Alison?
This is where it starts. Yeah.
Okay.
Hey guys. Yeah. Hey everybody. I'm really psyched to be here with you all. And, usually I'm kind of naughty in my presentations. And here I am again with this silly RIP. What do you think RIP means? And shout it out.
Rest in peace.
Yeah, rest in peace. And what I'm talking about is the whole idea of native, like, are you a native speaker? Are you a non-native speaker? Like that whole idea. Actually, the experts in the world have declared the whole idea dead. And that's why I have a tombstone here. And I'm saying that this idea is RIP is very sad. I know there will be funeral arrangements. But will we miss that idea when it's gone? No, we'll be so happy. Okay, so this idea is gone. Maybe not in our lives, but it will be. It's like a wave. Can I go to the next slide?
Yeah, just a minute. I'm trying to check on Ali.
Is there any resurrection of the natives? Is there a second coming? Is there a second coming? Is there a resurrection of the natives?
Yeah, I hope I'm not saying something bad, but inshallah, there won't be any resurrection of the idea of the racist idea. Okay, so my question is, have you guys ever witnessed accent racism? And that means that, somebody maybe wasn't treated well in a job interview or did not get a job or was told, you're not a native speaker and we hear a certain accent. Someone was not well treated because of imagined accent. Could you write in the chat yes or no if you've ever witnessed anything like this? Oh, I see someone wrote many times. Certainly, yes. Yes. Susan, hi Susan, good to hear from you. And all the time. That's it. Yeah, just yes with 4 S's. Certainly yes. Well, with all these yeses, guys, it means that we have to try to do something about it. And so that's why we really have to appreciate Miss Rana in creating this SIG. And for me, this is going to be my dissertation topic. So guys, can we go ahead to the next slide? And thank you all for responding.
Yes.
Yes. Now, the thing is, guys, this is a little joke. See, in the caption, it says, I love the British accent. The question is, which one? See, the thing is, there's so many British accents. And British and World English accent. Guys, we all have an accent. And let's take a native speaking country like the UK. How many accents are there? I don't know, something like 57. And we're going to try some right now. Could we have the next slide, please? Okay, now this is, no, go back one. One slide was skipped there. And it's really a fun, this guy, see this kid? He's so talented. And this is a video, and you're going to hear British and American accents. And then toward the end, there'll be some to guess from all over the world, like, I don't know, Japan or European countries. And hi, Dana. Yeah, so many British accents. So can we play this? I hope it'll play. Otherwise, I'll have to imitate them myself.
I doubt we can play it, but because we are on, because Alison, we are on a PDF, remember? So we can't. I don't. Yeah.
Oh, that's a terrible loss. Well, and this is let me try to explain the concept of the previous slide, which will not play for us. That young man is, how some people are very gifted in doing accents. It's like a type of acting. And he can do, in that video, he does maybe 7 British accents, and then he switches to an American accent where he says, suddenly he says, I need a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and it's so American. And then he switches to Italian, Japanese, and German, and our job is to guess, but unfortunately we won't be able to do that. And now this is also a video, this blue looking slide, and it won't play, but that's no matter, we can improvise. Look at the question at the top. How did all these accents, English accents, happen? We all agree that there are lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of English language accents. And it's all a result of something in history. It's an accident, an accident of history that we have. I don't know how many types of, you can think of the so many types of English language. Does anyone know what big event about 150 years ago caused all these many different types of English language accents to be with us today?
The Crusades?
I'll give you a hint, and it's the letter C. And you
Crusades?
got Crusades. No, but
No.
Crusades were more like 500 years ago. I'm talking 100 to 150, and it starts with C. It starts with COL.
Colonization.
The UK is a small little island, but all these boats went from that island over there to the Caribbean, over there to the US, to Canada, over there to India, over there to Australia, New Zealand. And what about, I skipped a big continent. What is it?
Birth of United States.
What about Africa?
Africa.
Africa,
Yes.
yes.
Africa. How many, so many English speakers in Africa. So the question here, and I wanted to share that video with you, but is how did it all, how is it that we're all speaking English and we're all speaking with many accents? It's because it all goes back to colonization. Now, that was then, and this is now. What's happening in the world now, and I'm almost ready to wrap this up, it is we have some urgent concepts for DEI. And DEI is a famous thing: diversity, equity, and inclusion. Most educational institutions in the world are trying to achieve diversity, equity, and inclusion. If you look at the vision statement or mission statement of the school or university where you are teaching, you'll probably see definitely the word diversity. Everyone is seeking diversity. Now, how to get it? Let's just look at these points. DEI is not just DEI, it's also linguistic diversity, not just general diversity, but we need to have linguistic diversity, equity, and inclusion. We need to include other languages. Do we want English to dominate everything and other languages to die, which is what is happening, being lost to humanity forever? No, we want to include other languages. And the second point about our students, you probably know, if you teach in the Gulf countries, or it's not just the Gulf countries, really anywhere, many schools and parents, they insist on having what they feel is a native speaker for their child to learn. But the funny thing is that the tables are turning. And I have written here, more accent exposure for students is more success in the future. In other words, the more different accents of English that students are exposed to, then the more they will be able to cope with life in the future. And this is the opposite of what their parents believe, but this is the coming trend. It's a way.
Alison, sorry to interrupt, but we have to keep in time, oh dear. Okay, so we have, yeah, Laya
one
also.
more, I think it was just one more slide where I introduced Laya. Yeah, celebrate difference. That's what it all amounts to. And in the next slide, I introduced Laya.
Okay, so that's it. So
if I might chip in, Coming to what Alison was saying about the parents, especially those in the Gulf, and who wants their children to be educated as excellent native speakers. We know native speakers just phonetically is not only important when it comes to learning English. And as you said, you are correctly said about bilingualism. And the research shows that when the child maintains his first language and culture, and he adds to another language, which Professor Cummins from the Canada showed that, and he called it, what did he call it? Additive bilingualism. And that is very important for the cognitive for the learner academically. But when the child knows only one language and he is monolingual, he might have no disadvantage or advantage when it comes to the academic attainment. So it is very important to be aware, people aware that how to teach English is not only phonetics. For example, I was reading with a child.
Excuse me, sir, sorry to interrupt you, but we will have this time during the coffee because we have to run according to the schedule. I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but we will have time for this discussion.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
and now we
We're very interested in hearing everybody's views, and this is really what it is all about. So we are going to all talk about it during the coffee break when we will have free discussion and about all of this. Okay, so as we were discussing and as Alison discussed, how many of us have faced this? Most of us, I'm sure, or maybe some of us at least. So would we like to make a difference? Would we like to change it? How we can do that? And this is what NEST is all about. So if you look at the possible solutions that we might have, this is what we have. This is again, yeah. So NEST offers a solution. We are here to create some awareness about the discrimination, what we can do, positive steps. So it's not about basically discrimination only with non-native speakers. Discrimination is wrong for anyone. So we are here to bridge the two communities. We want the two communities to work together, both native speakers as well as non-native speakers, because it is all about learning English. So we have to work together in collaborative projects. We need to bring awareness through collaborative projects, like we should talk about them in conferences, we should publish articles, we should write books, and make people aware about this. And as Alison mentioned in her slides, the term non-native English speaking teachers or speakers for that matter is negative. It has a negative connotation. It is in time or will be replaced by a better and a more positive term, which is called multilingual learners or speakers of English rather than non-native. So that's more positive approach. So this is why we are here together, and we are going to discuss more about this in a few minutes when our keynote speaker, Mr. Ali Fuad Selvi, he's going to talk about this issue. He's a well-known scholar from TEFL International. He's a good friend and colleague, and he kindly agreed to speak about it. Today's agenda, very quickly, before I introduce Laya to you, is that we had an opening and Mr. Allison spoke, and then we are going to introduce Ali, who is going to talk about the topic today, non-native speaker constructs, implications for the ELT professionals. And then we will have a small coffee break at 5:30 where everybody is free to talk and express their views. We will have 15 minutes. If you want, we can extend them to 20 minutes. And then at 5:45, we will have a discussion, an open discussion on artificial intelligence. Before that, we will discuss about open educational resources that one of our collaborating partners, Bridge Education, are offering. So they will talk about some free educational resources they can offer at the same time. They will talk about some courses that they're offering for our teachers around the globe, and TEFL Kuwait members, non-TEFL Kuwait members. It's for everybody. So they're going to talk about all those things. And then in the end, we will have an open discussion on artificial intelligence with Ms. Mercedes Vasquez, who is a very good friend, and she will open a discussion where everybody is allowed to talk. Now, this is something that everybody is concerned about. And actually, I'm going to invite Ms. Laya, who has started a new SIG that discusses ChatGPT, which everybody is concerned. Now I'm going to invite her. Laya, are you there?
Yes. Hello, everybody, and welcome. I'm really happy to see many faces. My name is Laya Magaram. I'm an English faculty from the United States, residing in UAE for the moment. I'm just here to have a brief talk and introduce my SIG on teaching and learning grammar and writing in the age of ChatGPT. All of you guys are, you know, the ChatGPT is a new software. It's based on artificial intelligence, and everyone's so curious about. I'm sure many of you guys are familiar with it, or maybe you have already started using it in your classrooms. But I am going to start my own SIG on this particular software and its usages on the ethical parts of it, how we can integrate it in our classrooms, with a focus on grammar and writing, especially writing. And also we're going to talk about the behavioral misconduct that so many of us are facing the challenges with our students. And I do have a very important speaker, which stay tuned until I introduce her name later on. We're still deciding on the exact date so that we can coordinate better and to come down with a set date. Most likely is going to be by the end of June, near to the end, almost end of June. And I will be sending out an invitation like Ms. Rana did to everybody. And I hope to see you guys all there.
Yes, thank you so much, Laya. So we are still waiting for our speaker, Ali, who is maybe will join in next 4 minutes. Until then, we are free to discuss anything that you would like to say. As we just mentioned, so many of us must have faced that kind of discrimination, condescension, these feelings of, where we undermine us at times. We are forced to undermine us. So would you like to share anything? The floor is open until Ali joins us, and we can discuss more about this, because he's going to give a talk on the topic, as you can see on the screen, which is, again, a very important topic. Non-native speaker constructs, implications for the ELT professionals, how it influences it and how it affects us in our daily lives. Yeah, so you're free to talk about it. Anybody?
¿Ya empezaste? Ya, ahora sí, oficialmente desde el día 8.
Yes, Mr. Shamsuddin, would you like to continue what you were saying? No, you're muted, sir.
I'm talking, I'm off topic, sorry, I was off topic.
No, it's all right, yeah, because we were running out of time.
What Alison was saying, so it's very important, we know that only phonetically is not important, but what is also important is about understanding the English. For example, the learners. I have been here in the UK since 2004, and I've been working with the primary schools, and especially developing English as an additional language. Even when you want to, when you read with the native speakers, for example, if you can see this, for example, this is one of the books they read primary schools, and when they see all this, that is good at everything, and you ask them why is the apostrophe there, they cannot answer. So it's not only about how to pronunciation, but deep down the concept. And what I was saying, flagging up, was Professor Cummins. What was saying was linguistic transferability hypothesis. And what he was saying was, if the learner knows the concept in his first language, it is easy for him to transfer to the second language, English, which is, for example, let me say, for example, if the learner knows his first language, the concept of water, maya, ma in Arabic, that it is a liquid that is drinkable liquids that the body needs. When he comes to learn to English, he doesn't need you embed that concept again and again, but he just needs that labeling, water. Water is ma. So it's very important and it's very critical that we as TEFL, I think, needs to focus about when it comes to teaching English, how to preserve the first language and build on the learner's second language. That's what I was saying. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. We really appreciate it. Anyone has faced a similar situation as we were talking about, where we face some kind of discrimination and professional?
Yes, Mr. Rana.
Yes,
Hello.
yes, Dr. Mahmoud. Yes, please.
Yes, I'd like to talk about the issue of native speakers and non-native speakers. That we don't have a problem with native speakers. We have a problem with non-native speakers, people in charge of companies, of schools, who have inferiority complex towards native speakers. They think that the only people who can speak English are native speakers.
Very
and
right.
They do not know what does it mean. An effective speaker is the speaker who can use the language correctly in terms of structure, in terms of vocabulary, expressing ideas, etc. And they do not know the physical fact that any teacher, if we bring native speakers to people after a certain age, they will not master or get the native accent, especially after the puberty period. So native speakers, we don't have a problem with them. We have people who are in charge, again, who insist or think that only native speakers can speak English fluently or in a well-structured manner. They do not care for education. And by the way, I wrote a book on this issue, and the book will be published soon by Cambridge. It has two parts, listening and speaking in depth. And I got many theories and many ideas that non-native speakers can speak as fluent as native speakers. They can express their ideas, except the accent. The accent is something gained after a certain age. Thank you very much.
I absolutely agree with you, Dr. Mahmoud, because you're right. It is we have nothing against native speakers, because as I mentioned in one of my slides, we need to work together. We need to work together to bridge the gap. And actually, we should not have any discrimination at all. And as you also mentioned, the problem lies with the recruiters. It is these people who create this kind of distinction. And actually, the students also do not have this. Maybe some students might feel it, but I don't think students have this kind of a problem. I have never come across in my entire career in Middle East of 10 years when a student made me feel that if I was inferior to any native speaker. So I think the problem lies with the recruiters who create this kind of discrimination or distinction, not with the people who are actually learning English. You know.
Thank you.
Yes, Alison. Yes, Alison.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Mahmoud and Rana. So much. Oh, I'm so sorry. Taxi calling me, but I'm not going until I can make this comment. Yes, Dr. Mahmoud, you were saying that some people believe that they're not able to learn the native accent past a certain age, but in the modern viewpoint, it's not a question of learning an accent. It's the new understanding is that all accents are created equal. This is we won't be calling it native speaker, non-native speaker. We'll be calling it multiple English language.
That's it. Yes. Community
Speakers.
or
MELS, multiple English language. so we won't have to worry about accents because we'll celebrate all accents in the future. And another point I'd like to make before I rush off here is that you were saying maybe it's the administrators who are causing this problem by insisting on this,
exactly.
However, there's another big party here. There's a big party here involved, and it's the parents.
Right.
Yes.
Dr. Ali is here.
Students,
Dr. Ali Fuad
Yes,
is here.
yes, I saw. Yeah, thank you so much, Alison, for making that comment. And
So
Have a great trip.
yes, thank you so much, Alison, for making that comment. And now we have Ali with us. Thank you so much, Ali, for joining us. And without wasting, yeah, Ali, can you see us?
I can see you. I can hear you. Hope you can see me and hear me as well.
Yes.
Yes, we can see you and hear you.
Us. Molly, can you put spotlight on Ali so
Yes.
people can see him? Thank you so much, Ali, for joining us. Let me introduce you to Ali, who is my former colleague at TEFL International. He's a good friend, and that's why I requested him to join us. I know he has written a book, and he knows so much on this, and he has a good authority on this, and that's the reason I invited him. So let me quickly introduce you to him. So Ali Fuad Selvi is an assistant professor of TESOL and applied linguistics in the MA TESOL program at the Department of English at the University of Alabama, United States. His research interests include global Englishes. Oh, that's a very, very favorite topic of mine. And I've written a small article on that. Socio-political aspects of English medium instruction, issues related to equity, inequity, professionalism, marginalization, and discrimination in TESOL, and critical language teacher education. Previously, he served as the area editor for the NNEST volume of the TESOL Encyclopedia of English Language Teaching and chair of the NNEST interest section at TESOL International Association. In addition to his scholarship and leadership in these areas, he was recently recognized as one of the TESOL International Association's 30 up and coming leaders in recognition of his potential to shape the future of both the association and the profession for years to come. Please welcome Ali. Please let's welcome him, and the floor is all yours, Ali. I already made you a co-host. You can share your slides. Let me stop sharing my screen.
Sounds great. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for this wonderful, wonderful introduction. Let me go ahead and share my screen with you. Just give me a second, please. Okay. Can you see my title slide? Sounds great.
Yes.
Absolutely. That's wonderful.
Yes.
Thank you so much. It is a great pleasure and honor to be here with you. And first of all, I'd like to go ahead and start by thanking Rana for inviting me to be a part of this conversation, to be a part of this space. I've been hearing and watching the developments of TEFL Kuwait and the activities that you're putting together. And I really appreciate for all the effort and time and energy and blood, tear and sweat that you put into this. And I'm very delighted to be here with you and share some of my ongoing thoughts about inequity, privilege, and marginalization in TESOL. That's a very multi-layered concept. So throughout this presentation, I'll go ahead and try to unpack with you some of those constructs, some of these tensions, some of these entanglements, so to speak. So I wish I had a presentation about unicorns and rainbows, but instead we're going to be talking about some of the disturbing realities in TESOL, both as a profession and as a field of inquiry. So as you know, we live in a world of divisions, whether you are in Kuwait or in the United States or in Japan or Russia or in somewhere else in the world. So I'm sure at some point in your life, you're being a part of division, right? So a world that is constantly and rigidly being divided by all sorts of divisions, like all sorts of fault lines, including linguistic, social, geopolitical, religious, intellectual, and all these fault lines contribute to fragmentation, instability, and of course, uncertainty, perhaps to the extent that we lose the very essence of who we are as individuals and what we do as TESOL professionals. These fault lines, on the other hand, also cut across people, cut across nations, borders and boundaries, and of course, worldviews. They create and solidify those divides, like us versus them, inside versus outside, center versus periphery, and so on and so forth. And more, these divisive borders and boundaries that we live by actually leads us to a point in the world and its inhabitants are defined by those dichotomies, juxtapositions, right? And mutually exclusive categories of identity and categorical systems. So these discourses of divisions are increasingly palpable in the tension between modern and, of course, the postmoderns. And of course, in the field of English language teaching, or in TESOL, in a world characterized by divisions that I just briefly talked about, it would be naive to assume that the field of TESOL would be immune to or unaffected by such divisions or polarizations. All these divisions that you see on this slide are actually a testament to some of the pervasive divides that we use, that we are subjected to, that sometimes are imposed on us, sometimes that we impose on others, right? So, and of course, this is part of who we are and how we perceive the world, how we perceive the profession, how we perceive even the future of TESOL. And of course, this morning, I would like to talk about, and of course, problematize one of the most pervasive and detrimental divisions in the field of TESOL, native English-speaking teachers, who are often abbreviated as NESTs for the sake of economy, and of course, non-native English-speaking teachers and NESTs. So when you take a quick look at the literature on these labels, one of the earliest pieces that you'll probably encounter is the 1992 ELTJ piece by Peter Medgesh, who very rightfully raised the question of who's worth more. Well, fast forward to 2020s, here is another article that you see raising the very same question. So it seems that our obsession with these terms and often in a competitive manner, please take a closer look at this question part here, who's worth more, in a competitive manner, it's still alive and kicking. So you're probably wondering, you're not impressed. And of course not, and I don't blame you. Or you think that there is nothing under the sun. So the more it changes, the more it's the same thing. But believe me, there are changes happening in the world, in the field, and I would like to talk a little bit more on that as well. So important changes are happening. So in the remainder of my presentation, I'll go ahead and describe and problematize and of course deconstruct values and discourses about such conceptualization. So, but before we do that, we first of all need to step back a little bit and understand the problem with these terms. And to understand the problem with these terms, we need to go back to the colonial and the government, colonial and nation-state governmentality of the 17th and 18th centuries, which created, as we know, a monolingual bias, right? So this, we've actually promoted the monoglossic language ideologies and promoted monolingualism as norm. And of course, as a result, this created this notion of an idealized native speaker who was a monolingual and monocultural and who speaks a standard variety, whatever that is, and inherits the language as a birthright and was charged with the task of protecting it from contamination. And of course, as the exclusive owner of a national language. So there is this direct connection between national language and the idealized native speaker. So fast forward to the 20th century, we realized this idealized native speaker mentality had decisive and to some extent destructive influences on various aspects of second and foreign language teaching. First, This mentality prioritized idealized native speaker as the universal linguistic and cultural target for acquisition and use, irrespective of language teaching and learning context. In other words, it is used as the ultimate goal, ultimate target for language learning and for language learners. Second, it also permeates into the field of second language acquisition and research. I'm sure many of you have at some point in your professional development have taken an SLA class. And of course, you've come across with terms such as interlanguage, fossilization, comparative fallacy, or interaction hypothesis, or ultimate attainment. All these terms, all these constructs actually presupposes, they presuppose the idealized native speaker as the ultimate point. So in other words, this worldview sort of defines non-native speakers as deficient or defective communicators, limited by an underdeveloped communicative competence, as Firth and Wagner talked about. The third point is in terms of ownership. So in terms of ownership, this construct places the ownership of English and default expertise in the hands of an idealized native speaker. And of course, finally, we got the pedagogy. So we got the target and the theory and ownership. And of course, it basically shapes the pedagogical theory and research as the bedrock of transnationalized English language teaching. So just to summarize the conversation thus far, this mentality viewed idealized native speaker construct as a target for language acquisition and a model for route of acquisition. So guess what? What is left? What is left is instruction. Unfortunately, we also use the idealized native speaker as a benchmark and as a yardstick to define an effective language teacher, which is sort of the connection that I would like to go ahead and problematize at this point. And of course, to do this, I will go back and rely on one of my favorite quotes by Barbara Seidelhofer, who argues that the problem is actually an automatic extrapolation from competent speaker to competent teacher based on linguistic grounds alone. So the problem here is actually these labels actually establish a causal and a priori relationship between identity and the associated teacher skills and competencies. So taking this to a different level, the problem also creates a binary, right? So it creates an us versus them kind of dichotomy, which we don't need at all. And of course, the problem here is that we treat one of those categories as a homogeneous group and use them as a benchmark, influencing various aspects of ELT enterprise, and of course define and are measured by. And of course, the other, whose linguistic and cultural and pedagogical capabilities are defined vis-a-vis their idealized native speaker other, perpetually confined into the prefix of none. In other words, if you call someone a non-native speaker, that person, or a non-native English speaking teacher, that person is boxed into the non-prefix for the rest of their professional lives. So, and of course, it comes with a set of connotations related to what this person can do, cannot do, should not do, will do, and will not do, you know? So this is a very problematic, from my own perspective, this is a very problematic and subscribes to a deficit orientation. And by the way, I'm so sorry that I'm feeling a little under the weather, but I'll get through the end of this presentation. So sorry about this terrible voice of mine today. So interestingly, the problem here, as I see, is that we reduce the qualities of an effective teacher into contested categories of identity, either assumed by or ascribed to the English language teaching professional. So in other words, these terms forces us to adopt a very reductionist perspective, boxed ourselves into the mutually exclusive binary categories of black or white, nests or a nest, so which is something that we should oppose, right? So this, and of course, this problem here that, as I see it, creates what I call a compulsory native speakerism, just like compulsory heterosexualism. So it serves as a pervasive professional ideology, serving as the Damocles' sword hanging over ELT professionals around the world. And of course, more problematic part of this, for many language teaching professionals, this creates a damaging impact on their self-image, on their teacher persona, on their self-esteem, and of course, even on their in-class performance. And of course, the sadder part is that researchers often adopt a pathological discourse to define these impacts. So in the remainder of our conversation, I will go ahead and follow Sulaiman Jenkins' words, and would like to talk about one of the biggest elephants in the room, which is discrimination and discriminatory practices in ELT. And of course, here is the basic question that we will pursue in this segment. What are the sources of discrimination and discriminatory practices in ELT? To facilitate our conversation, we'll take a closer look at some of the job advertisements as salient sources and develop some of working conclusions about them. And this is our first ad. And this ad looks for native English speakers. So there is an exclusive emphasis, as you can see here, highlighted in the rectangle box there. So there is an exclusive emphasis on speakerhood. So what we will do, we'll just go ahead and create what I call sources of discrimination in ELT access. So the basic, and of course, probably the most fundamental access on the sources of discrimination in ELT will probably come from the construct of nativeness. Let's move on. This is our second job ad. And this time the position announcement takes the discriminatory treatment to the next level by specifically targeting native English teachers who are Caucasian. So God forbid, if you are an English language teacher, but also a person of color, so this will bar you from applying for this position. So if you take a closer look at this, to the bottom of this, so you will see that professionals who possess clear speech with a universally understandable accent. And of course, we can spend days and days on what that really means and how we can sort of define what a universally understandable accent is, and we'll probably go ahead and use American or British English as a euphemism for that. So let's move on. The second dimension. So we go back to our sources of discrimination in ELT. So we go ahead and add race and accent to the image, right? So that as the potential sources of discrimination. This is our third ad, which calls for native speakers who are from the UK, from the US, New Zealand, Canada, Ireland, and Australia. And Ireland is listed there twice. Sorry about that. So, and in other words, if you're a native speaker who's from another country, your qualifications, your qualities will probably not going to matter. So we'll also add the age as another dimension here, as it stipulates you to become between the ages of 20 and 38. So going back to our diagram, we add age and origin as our new dimensions of discrimination. So this visual that you see here on this slide is not a position announcement per se, but comes from a portal that lists different job advertisements around the world. And as you clearly see, the passport you hold makes a huge difference in your job prospects. And of course, adding passport to the diagram. So this is getting multi-layered and more complicated, as you see. And here's a snapshot from the FAQ section of an online English language teaching platform from Turkey, offering English courses, and the emphasis on America, Canada, and England to create an emphasis on native or inner circle varieties of English. So let's go ahead and add the variety to the diagram as well. And here's another one. This one exclusively calls for a British Muslim male English native teachers. So you have to check all these all these categories for that. So you can be Muslim, but you also have to be British. You have to be male, but you have to be English native teacher as well. So we see that nationality, religion, nativeness, and gender as dimensions, as gatekeeping dimensions in this diagram. So let's go ahead and add nationality. Let's go ahead and add religion as well as gender to the diagram. So just to summarize, we might perhaps need to think discrimination as an intersectional construct. In other words, all these different categories of identity intersect in very complex, in very intertwined matter, in a complicated ways to create practices of discrimination and discriminatory practices here, right? So it manifests itself in the form of accent, in the form of gender, age, passport you carry, country of origin, appearance, even sexual orientation, ethnicity, and so on and so forth. So mostly based on nativeness. Obviously, this is one of the salient sources, but as well as in other dimensions. And of course, one thing that we need to emphasize that it is directed as to both native and non-native English-speaking teachers. So in the remainder of my talk, I would like to share 5 important things that I believe that you should know. So number 1, despite all the efforts that we see by professional associations at national and international levels, the ELT profession is still characterized by blatant or subtle discrimination and discriminatory practices in hiring processes, in salary schemes, and in workplace settings. And of course, such practices unfortunately normalize discrimination through institutionalized policies and practices, and damage, most importantly, damage the professional status and stature of the ELT profession and professionals therein. It's wonderful that TESOL Spain, California TESOL, British Columbia in Canada, they all offer counter statements, position statements, white papers to raise their voices against, but we still need to go beyond that. Number 2, the idealized nativeness or idealized native speaker construct is the most salient discriminatory dimension across both the physical and the online world. As we saw in the actual examples, it is a gendered, it's a class, and it's a race practice, producing and even perpetuating and reifying inequality and injustice for all ELT professionals, irrespective of their nativeness status. The third point is discrimination and discriminatory practices in ELT include much more than hiring practices. So the examples that I shared with you earlier only covered the hiring stage because we only looked at the job announcements, right? Position announcements. But such practices, such discriminatory practices also exist in salary schemes and in workplace settings. And of course, unfortunately, it leads to, for example, essentialized division of labor. If you're coming from this background, you can teach productive skills, or if you're coming from that background, you're going to be teaching receptive skills, etc. Skewed approaches to authenticity. You may not necessarily be seen as an authentic provider of language input. It also includes institutionalized dehumanizing impositions. For example, I know many of my former students, for example, who work in Turkey, were given anglicized names and identities, even fake histories, to lie parents about their backgrounds, because those individuals were marketed as native English speaking teachers to the parents, for example. And of course, we also have the microaggressions, especially towards ELT professionals of color. And of course, finally, we got the payment, the less payment issue, and of course, more teaching loads and qualifications. So if you want to take a closer look at the literature, so you see that discrimination is much more than hiring process. It's only one side of the conversation. Number 4, of course, discrimination and discriminatory practices may come from an intersection, as we talked about, intersection of several perspectives, where nativeness is only one, yet perhaps the most dominant factor. So it manifests itself in wide variety of different forms and in combination. So that makes it even more interesting and more complicated. So, and the fifth point is we definitely need to move beyond our conventional approaches in terms of inequity, privilege, marginalization, and discrimination in English language teaching. Oftentimes, these constructs that we use are juxtaposed across categories. So native English speaking teachers on one hand, non-native English speaking teachers on the other hand. And for the sake of conversation and discussion, we tend to make very broad generalizations about individuals, irrespective of their socio-historical backgrounds. We often tend to think, oh, this person is a native English speaking teacher, so they're always privileged. They're always this, they're always that. And of course, non-native English speaking teachers, they're always marginalized. And so while this sort of understanding may be true in some instances, it doesn't really give us the full picture. So let me show you with some case scenarios. So imagine that you're a NEST, native English speaking teacher, who've been living and teaching in, let's say in Kuwait for 12 years, and you feel yourself part of the local, both culturally and linguistically. So the question is it really fair to call you an outsider, right? So, or let's say you are a native English speaking teacher with experience and expertise, but another native English speaking teacher with no such background and no such credentials was given the exact same job to you, right? How would this make you feel? Can we still argue that all native English speaking teachers are universally privileged? So that sort of shatters that understanding, right? Here is another one. Your NEST colleague is neither considered for a teaching position nor for promotion because she is not a local, she's not a citizen in the local context. So is it fair to argue that native English speaking teachers are universally privileged? Or you're a NEST with experience and expertise in teaching English language teaching, but you are not considered for a teaching position because you don't come from or look like someone who comes from the US or the UK, right? So can we still argue that NESTs are universally privileged? So I really don't think so. So we definitely need to adopt those nuanced understandings when it comes to inequity, privilege, and marginalization and discrimination within and across categories of being and becoming, and of course, beyond the English language classroom. So therefore, I argue, quoting two of my great friends and colleagues and research partners, who said all ELT professionals may potentially experience privilege and marginalization in relation to their perceived or ascribed ascribed identities in a given context. So we definitely need to think about the socio-historical realities of ELT professionals in their context. So, we language teachers or teachers in general like the idea of having solid conclusions. So what is one big idea that I would like you to take away from this talk? So when it comes to these terms, NESTs and NS, here are four options. Here are four different options or positions that anyone can adopt. First is you can still go ahead and use these terms and you see no inherent problem with them, okay? So I hope by now I provided a convincing argument that they're very problematic, but you still can go ahead and say, I'm going to use these terms and will feel okay about them. Or the second position that you can adopt is that you can still use these terms, but use it with caution. For example, a lot of people, when they're writing, they use scare quotes or single quotations to problematize, or sort of at least to signal that there are some inherent problems about these terms. The third alternative is that you can go ahead and use alternative terminology in addition to nest and nest, right? So some people proposed multilingual teachers, others called bilingual teachers. And of course, but these terms are so powerful and so pervasive in the literature that it really had not transformed sort of the literature itself. But of course, you can adopt this position as well. And the fourth position, which maybe seem a lot more radical as compared to the previous ones, is that you can say, I'm not going to use these terms, right? You can go ahead and completely reject the using of these terms and say, these are not the most useful terms to define my professional identity, because they make a clear, as Barbara Seidelhofer talked about and I shared earlier, makes an automatic extrapolation from a competent speaker to a competent teacher alone. So, and of course it is up to you. So an important reminder is that these labels that we talked about are ideologically constructed categories of being and becoming. So they're loaded with values, they're loaded with stereotypes, they're loaded with worldviews, and of course, shaping individuals' being and becoming. So, and I'm not going to tell you whether you should use this or whether you shouldn't use that, but my suggestion is to please at least think about the consequences of using these terms next time if you choose to use them. What do you gain or what do you lose by using or not using these terms? So if people do not become qualified to teach English merely because it is their mother tongue, right? So which, as Rosie Malum talked about earlier in 2000s, people also do not become qualified just because they learn it as a second language or as a foreign language. If the former is native speaker fallacy, the latter should be seen as a non-native speaker fallacy. So what we actually need as English language teachers are non-negotiable characteristics that are applicable to all of us, like experience, expertise, over contested terms as nests and nests. And of course, a more egalitarian ELT profession is possible, and I believe it starts with you. So thank you so much. This concludes sort of my talk. And if you would like to hear a written overview of my presentation today, please be on the lookout for a state of the art review that is going to be published by Language Teaching in the next couple of weeks or months, hopefully. So we submitted this article and hopefully it will be out very soon. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ali. That was really informative and really an eye-opener. You presented a different aspect to your discussion, to the native speakerism and non-native speakerism, that at some point all of us get discriminated against, isn't it?
Right.
Because it's not just the native and non-native concept, it's also sometimes you're faced with people where you are living. So you could be discriminated against. It's us versus them also. It's not just a native and non-native concept. Yeah, it's another side to it. And I do agree that this is sometimes what we face in different places. So now we would like to take some questions for Ali. If people have questions, we are open to them. Do we have any questions, Molly, in the chat while Ali was speaking? You are muted, Molly.
Oh, yeah, there are so many questions. I'll read out.
Yeah, please. Thank you so much, Molly.
Yeah. Most of them are like comments, but there were a couple questions. Let me look for it. So many of them have commented on how worse it was, you know, when they were looking for a new job. And one question.
I mean, this is very sad because it sort of is connected to your everyday life. I mean, because we as individuals, we sort of tend to think about this as a professional construct or as a professional concern, but in the end, it's also connected to sort of our opportunities and sort of the opportunities that we bring to our family members, right? And of course, in the end, you're going to, this defines your career opportunities. This defines your sort of your monthly salary. So that is connected to what you can or cannot provide to your kids, for example, or yourself, or, you know, that's why, I mean, it's very a personal matter at one, you know, if you think it's not just a professional matter, but it's also a very highly personal issue that we need to think about.
Yeah, and it's very unfortunate, as you mentioned, sometimes we are faced with situations where you know, we don't want them in our lives, but we are forced to accept them at many times. And as before you joined us, we were discussing it, that many times it's the recruiters, and you pointed it in your slides also, it's the recruiters who force this. And I know while we were working together, Ali, with TEFL International, TEFL has a very strong policy about it, and they are trying to be as inclusive as possible, as and their policies show us. But the thing is, there's still a lot that needs to change, and a lot needs to happen. And we all have to bring that change. I think we need to work. Would you like to advise us how we can work together? Now, you're writing, of course, a lot on this topic, how we can work together, the two communities, so that we can bring this change.
No, well, like you said, I mean, this problem hasn't occurred overnight, and it will not go away overnight. So it requires a lot of effort. And of course, that we need to think about how different stakeholders in the English language teaching enterprise can go ahead and support this. So all the way from pre-service language teachers, they need to be exposed to the idea in their English language teaching programs. So teacher educators need to be involved and on board with the idea of creating an equitable landscape for employment and professionalism. So we also need to think about how sort of we can collaborate with the administrators and of course the policymakers. Oftentimes we tend to think that it will be bottom up, but in other ways it could also be top down. So we need to go ahead and reach out to powerful policymakers who can create, if you can go ahead and convince them, and if we can sort of have an influence on the policies at the policy level, so that will also make a positive influence on the employment landscape. Let's be honest, discrimination and discriminatory practices will be there for a long time, because many recruiters or many administrators that, you know, English language teaching is an unregulated business. It's an unregulated sector to a large extent. So in a field like this, there will be individuals who will be coming from a very wild and very profit-oriented mentality, and will try to convert those stereotypes about idealized native speakers into US dollars, British pounds, and whatever the currency might be. Right. So but the point is, there are also administrators who may not necessarily think this as a discriminatory practices, but just an everyday practice. Right. So that's why we need to understand our sort of conversation is very much limited to language teaching and teachers and researchers. But there is, I mean, we need to make a huge stride in terms of, number one, administrators, number two, parents, of course, who invest in their children's future and their education, and of course the layperson. So we need to make this conversation and a discussion of everyday practice. So we need to establish a closer ties with media, for example, both print media as well as the social media. So we need to explore all these different avenues and of course promote professionalism and experience and expertise as our non-negotiables in the field of English language teaching. And I don't think any other, I mean, we need to have, of course, a more comprehensive survey to make that claim, but English language teaching is one of those fields that we have discrimination and discriminatory practice are this obvious and this level of pervasiveness. So that's very sad, and that's very troubling and concerning. And it's pretty much all around the world right now.
Very unfortunate. Definitely, I do fully agree with you. Actually, something question is related to what you just said. There is a question from Alia. She says a very interesting presentation, but the question is, how can we bring the change in the mindset of parents? And that's very true. To ask for native speaking teachers, and this is very true, yani people, sometimes it's not the students, it's the parents who force institutions to have these as policies where they request for native speakers. So the question is, how can we persuade, or how can we make a change in the mindset of the parents who think that the native speakers are the best models for the children?
Well, there are a couple of things that we can do, I think. If we, as however we define we, let's go back and adopt these problematic constructs. So if you're talking about they have this preference towards native English speaking teachers, and we as non-native English speaking teachers feels intimidated and feel discouraged by this, and what can we do to convince parents? One of the things that we can do better teachers, right? So if we can do a better job in classroom, right? If we can create meaningful learning opportunities for language learners who can excel in the English language, so they'll probably go ahead and recognize that we are effective language teachers in the first place, right? So, and of course, the other thing, let's not forget the fact that these parents have at some point have become or been subjected to these stereotypes. So they are coming from a background where inbuilt stereotypes are part of their worldview and are part of their thinking. So that's why we need to excel ourselves, I think. We need to create an image, and of course in practice an effective language teaching practices, so that they will have a clear understanding. Oh, I don't need to. The same thing happens with the immersion model, right? A lot of people think for someone to learn English, they have to travel to the UK, they have to travel to the US, and they have to be part of the immersion environment. While immersion environment has lots of different possibilities and lots of different opportunities, it is a very demanding and it's a very costly endeavor to begin with. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's the only option, right? So we can convince individuals that, yeah, you don't have to spend all this money to send your kid to the US or to the UK if your goal is to learn English language effectively. So here is an alternative, and here is an option. And of course, the other thing is we need to think about for example, if we adopt the global English's perspective, right? So we need to think about exposure to different language varieties and different language models. So, and of course, using English as a lingua franca. We're not really learning English to learn or to simply communicate with the native speakers of English language, right? So English, if it's an international language, if it's a global language, right now I don't speak Arabic and you don't speak Turkish, Rana, but we're relying on an international language as a lingua franca here, right? So, and of course, we don't need an external benchmark to define sort of communicative success. So we need to think about, we need to go back and think about our fundamentals, our principles in terms of effective language learning and effective language use and effective communication.
Yeah, no, I do agree with you. There is one more question, Ali. I would say there are similar questions. One says, how can we bridge the gap between native speakers versus non-native speakers? And continuation could be, are there any techniques to, I don't know how you can say that, to convert non-native English speaking teachers into NEST or native English speaking teachers, and how to handle these techniques in our real life? I don't think there's a need to change ourselves into native, but I would like Ali, you to answer this.
Yeah, I mean, once again, if we use native speakers or native English speaking teachers as the benchmark and as the yardstick, as the goal for language learning and use and instruction, I don't think that will get us very far. But we need to think about, how can I, as a language teacher, be more effective and more effective to my language learners? How can I create the best and the most optimal condition for my language learners so that they learn the language? And if I am a language learner, a language user, I need to think about what defines my communicative success, rather than whether I can sound and speak and use the language as a native English speaking user from an inner circle variety. So I think we need to shift our mindset. And of course, that sort of defines the next steps for that. And I don't think that's the answer that this person wanted, but sorry, that I have a different perspective and I have a different take on this.
Yeah, as we mentioned in the beginning, also we both specialize in our own ways. And native speakers have their own special skills, and non-native speakers, because we learned it the hard way, we are good in certain aspects of language, and we learned it through grammar or through other ways. So we are good in some other fields. So I think there's a balance there. And when we talk about language, it's really important to have the real criteria to be the yardstick, and not who is a native speaker or who's a non-native speaker. We don't need to be either, isn't it? We can be just language speakers, good language speakers.
Right.
Rana?
Yeah, Sandy, can you read it out, please, if you know the
Yes, so Fayaz is asking if Dr. Ali believes that the online teaching during the pandemic has brought any change in this perception about native, non-native teachers and their work.
Oh, wow. That's an interesting question. I don't have the exact empirical data to give a clear idea or clear comment on this. And I'm not entirely sure. I think no one wants to remember the pandemic times and the online teaching. Well, especially emergency remote teaching. It wasn't an online teaching. It was emergency remote teaching, because none of us were prepared for this. None of us had, well, a lot of us didn't have this the support system, technological infrastructure, and so on and so forth. We just found ourselves in the midst of this emergency remote teaching. But that's an interesting question. That's something, and thank you very much for this question. I will think about that, and we'll go back and take a look at the literature and see if there are any research studies out there that sort of raise that question. But that sounds like an interesting endeavor.
Actually, he has further added to the question. He says, I'm asking this because online teaching is a whole set of new skills.
Oh, that's true. Again, well, I can sort of relate to that, because if we conceptualize language teaching as a skill set, as an expertise, right? So that becomes no one's automatic endeavor to begin with. It is a skill and it needs to be learned. No one, well, of course, we have this idea, oh, I was born as a teacher. And of course, this dramatic or romantic ideas. And of course, I can get that in terms of at the level of identity. But language teaching, or teaching in general, is a skill, and it's a learned skill. And of course, if it's a learned skill, it is no one's automatic endeavor to begin with. So it needs to be learned. So we need to think about how we can go beyond these contested terms, and those contested terms do not really make any contributions to learning of these skills. So it is something beyond that. That's why, for example, if you take a closer look at, and it's going to be on the article that I shared on the slide right now. So we also refer to, for example, the works of Donald Freeman and his colleagues about English for teaching. And he argues that English for teaching is a specialized way of using the English language, right? You should consider this like an ESP, right? English for specific purposes. And therefore, it sort of positions teaching expertise and teaching competencies beyond these contested terms of native speakers and non-native speakers. So the term itself, again, look at this, native speaker. It doesn't say anything about being a teacher. It's all about speakerhood. But teaching is completely different thing. Obviously, the subject matter is the same, right? So it's still the English language. So when you say native English speaking teacher, we're making a automatic connection between speakerhood and the teacherhood, right? So in order to make that connection, we need expertise, we need experience, and we need competencies. So what I suggest is that we need to prioritize those over these problematic terms.
Yeah, so we need to be good teachers rather than be.
Exactly.
Rana, I think organizations such as ours can definitely help with this. For example, I remember, and it's several years back now, TESOL International, if you wanted to post a job ad with TESOL International, they refuse to post anything that says native speaker. Even when there was an ad that said native like speaking, it was turned down and refused. So we can do something about it, but it's the perceptions of people in general, I mean, why do the administrators in that want them? Because that's the general stereotype of the population that we're in, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But
I agree. I mean, professional associations have a huge role because once again, they create spaces of solidarity. They create and they promote spaces and discourses of professionalism. And oftentimes when they're subjected to discrimination and discriminatory practices, whether nests or NS, they can always go back and say, hey, my colleagues at TEFL Kuwait, they got this position statement, they got this space, they got this support system. So individuals need collaboration, they need solidarity to fight against this. And of course, therefore, I think we need to think about how we can create an inclusive environment in terms of landscape, in terms of professional landscape. And of course, we need to think about and define what we can do as different stakeholders in English language teaching.
There is one question which we missed from Mr. Mohammed Wahabin. He says, does nativeness mean strictly by birth? Yani, I think what he's trying to say is, can it be acquired? What Sandy also meant, like a native like fluency, or is it only when we talk about nativeness, is it only being born in a certain culture, or we can also acquire it? It applies for any language, I would say, not just English.
Well, I think it depends on whom you ask and what kind of literature that you draw upon from. So for some, it has to be the birthright. So, and for others, for example, I had some students when I was teaching at the University of Maryland, 1.5 second generation Korean students who were born in the US, right? Who were born in the US, was raised in the US. They're native speakers of English, and they're also bilingual in Korean. So, and because they were Korean, as part of their heritage, they wanted to go back to Korea and teach English there. And in several of the jobs that they applied for, they got rejections, not because they were not native speakers, but they did not look like a native speakers.
Very unfortunate, yeah.
So that sort of demolishes those technical and scientific contributions about who is a native speaker. Can native speaker can nativeness be acquired after birth or after critical period, and so on and so forth. So that sort of encourages us to think that nativeness as a construct is highly ideological to begin with.
Yeah, if I may, it's also very narrow, because they'll even look at me as who I am a native speaker, but when I put on the hijab, then all of a sudden I no longer looked like a native speaker. And I had people, I was working at a school at the time that I put it on, and they told me, no, that if I put it on, I would have to leave my job. So, I mean, it's quite, it's crazy. And even we had problems here before with African-American Americans who they're like, no, but you're not American, and it's like, yes, I am. It's that stereotypical image that they're expecting. And that's sometimes has nothing to do with the way that they speak.
Yeah. Unfortunately, yeah, you're right. I mean, this resonates with for example, Black English speakers, English language teachers working in different parts of Asia, for example. It is very sad and it's very disturbing, and it tells us that this notion is used as a euphemism, and then there are a lot of stereotypes, there are a lot of layers that we need to unpack. So nativeness, although it sounds like a linguistic construct, it has never been, and it will never be a linguistic construct to begin with.
So now it's time for coffee. It's a coffee break. So we are open for, we can continue this discussion. We have lots of people who might be like, I think there's Mr. Amir. He wants to say something. Yeah, please unmute yourself, Mr. Amir, and you can feel free to say, Mr. Amir, can you hear us? I think you have to unmute yourself.
Rana, do they have
I think so. I think so. Can you check?
They have their own too. I have. They nobody's muted. It's just that if they have the preference of muting themselves, they have that.
I think he has some issues with the.
I think they can unmute. Yeah, he's having some issues probably.
Some issues. Okay, just to continue with what Sandy was saying just now regarding her hijab, it all comes to how you look like. It's a very funny incident that I would like to quote here regarding one of my colleagues who was not a native speaker from one of the Eastern European countries, and she was to teach IELTS in one of the educational institutions in Kuwait. Very unfortunate. She was asked to dye her hair blonde so that she can look like, she had fair skin. She looked like a Caucasian, but she was asked to dye her hair blonde so she may look like a Caucasian, a real Caucasian. This is very unfortunate. And she did that, unfortunately. Oh. This is so funny, but you know, this is how things happen. Yes, Ali.
One of the things that I want to add before we call it off is that whenever I give this kind of presentations, I often get the comments, or maybe during the Q&A, or after the breaks, and during the breaks or after the presentation, is that, oh, this whole movement or this whole line of research is about, you know, being against native speakers or native English speaking teachers, etc. This is something that I wanted to clarify. This is a huge misconception. The point that I'm trying to make here is to put the conversation to a more egalitarian, more professional, and more inclusive plane, so that we don't talk about nativeness or lack thereof, but more like experience. What are our non-negotiable as language teachers? In other words, if you become a doctor, right? Or if you become a, I don't know, an accountant, there's no such thing as you have to be this, or you can't, you have to be that, etc. Right? Or you have to be sick to become a doctor, so that kind of sort of mentality. But the the point is what we're calling for is professionalism, and it should be applicable to all of us. So this is not an us versus them kind of dichotomy, and this is not this is a matter of professionalism, and of course we need to think along those lines. So
may I just
I
add
think I think you mentioned it in your slides very clearly, and you just said it, that it's about being good speakers and being good teachers. So it's about being good teachers of a language, just as we cannot say, okay, an accountant has to be like this. We don't have a criteria. They should have the relevant credentials. So we should have relevant credentials as good teachers, not as native or non-native speakers, isn't it? This is what you're trying to say. So very good viewpoint. Yes, somebody was saying something. Sorry, I interrupted you.
So I was going to add something about the nativeness and non-nativeness, that sometimes in response to the Korean generation that you were talking about, and sometimes some the origins, generations are born, like for example Koreans or some Middle Easterns are born in the United States, but they are raised in a total different country, and they're but then they count as an American because they were born. So nativeness lies differently in so many different ways. Depending on if you're in a job looking have a desire for a job search, then you're going to be questioned. Are they looking for an American accent, or what does really nativeness lies? It's kind of confusing, to be honest with you. So it just goes deeper than that.
Yes, you're right, Laya. I mean, of course, he addressed that issue. It's very right. It's all about, it's two different aspects that we have connected together somehow, and we shouldn't do that. It should be segregated, native speakers and good language teachers. So it's not about being either of them. I think we have 5 more minutes. We can still continue. We have our next speaker already here with us. Miss Anna Hirel. She's here from Bridge. Welcome, Anna. It's great to have you here. And
thank you.
Let me give you the make you co-host so you can share your slides. We'll put you on in 5 minutes or maybe 2-3 minutes. Until then, we still have time to continue this discussion during our coffee break. Yes, Ali, you raised your hand. You wanted to say something?
No, I just gave a clap to everyone sharing the space with me. Really
no,
appreciate
it was a very fruitful discussion. I think you really did a great job. Yeah. And Ali, you really did a great job of making it so simple and easy to understand, and make it very clear.
I'm glad to hear that.
We don't need to mix the two things together. This is the takeaway today, I would say, isn't it? That we have to be good language teachers rather than as native speakers or non-native speakers. It should not be. We are not against anyone. We learn from each other. We learn from each other. This is so important to understand.
Rana, sorry, some participants were asking if Dr. Ali Fuad can share the presentation slides. Are we willing to do that, or how does
I'm happy to share the article, which is a more extensive version. So I'll be happy to share with Rana, if that's okay, and then she can send it to everybody.
Yes, no problem. We will share it, and you can also, if can you put your email there, Ali?
Oh,
so
sure.
If they have further questions, they can send it to you, and you can directly address it to them. Due to time shortage, maybe they were not able to ask, or sometimes maybe something might come up later.
And
Rana, I'm going to stop the recording, and can you please start the recording? Because my
Yes.
internet is not very stable.
Okay, sure, no problem. Anna, would you